Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Akin Cariolo here, and he is the co-founder of Bondi Finance. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So really interesting. A mutual friend of ours, told me about your company. It sounded really interesting. It's all like high finance kind of stuff, but high finance on the crypto. Can you talk more about what Bondi Finance is?
So Bondi is basically a tokenization platform that focuses on global corporate bonds, that focuses on tokenizing global corporate bonds. So we take existing publicly issued and publicly traded corporate bonds, and we create bond tokens backed by them. So we allow you to get exposure to these bonds on chain with your crypto. That's the way basically of what we do.
Cool. Is there any so like what is the regulatory implications of it? Is it what's the nation state that you tie into?
So it's in Bermuda. So what we do is we work with a partner in Bermuda. It's they're called Ensuro. They're also a fellow startup in the Buenos Aires scene. So what we do is Bermuda has something called a segregated accounts company. So
Huh.
there's a company. It's like a hub and spoke model almost. So there's a company, and you can create segregated accounts within that company that is bankruptcy remote from that company. So what we do is, and also Ensure has a tokenization license, digital assets license in Bermuda. So what we did is with our case, we applied to the Bermuda Monetary Authority, got approval from them directly, so they know it case by case. So we have a segregated cell under Ensuro that we are leasing as Bondi, and the covenants of that cell is basically to be used to hold the underlying assets of Bondi's bond tokens. So the underlying bonds of our bond tokens are segregated from the risks and balance sheets of both Ensuro and Bondi.
Wow.
Yeah. So and the bond token holders get a direct economic benefit of the corresponding bond token, because all bonds are held in one segregated account, but each bond token corresponds to one bond, like the underlying of bond of that bond token in the account.
Very cool. It's so interesting. So we can go a lot of different directions here. We can go into sort of which nation state has the best tokenization framework,
Hmm.
how that's going to play out over the next few years, because that sounds really interesting. We're in Argentina. Argentina is also making sort of similar moves towards a some sort of tokenization regulatory. Because I've been following this for so long that it's just like it's all about the nation state,
Yeah.
and the fact that we're just living in a globalized world where there's a bunch of different nation states, including small nation states like Bermuda, who just have been doing this for a long time about
Yeah.
like how to work intelligently with new financial instruments. And then within the United States, we have so many interesting things, and
Hmm.
like we have Wyoming. Wyoming created the LLC that then got popular in Delaware, and Delaware became the main place, and now Texas is becoming a place. And we have this interesting federal versus state system in the United States for all the good and the bad that has. And then you just have all the rest of the world doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So, and you've already gone through the process in one nation state.
Yeah.
What's your view of the global
Yeah.
competitive environment here?
So, like, what has to be said is, first of all, we have to admit that the Bermuda setup, although it is robust and it works, it's not the final form, right? It's not the ideal that
Yeah, yeah.
we're working towards as
Going
an
for it.
industry.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
in the end, it's a wrapper. We chose
yeah,
it because it's one of the best of the wrappers.
yeah,
So ideally, of course, holding a bond token should not be any different from holding the bond in a
yeah,
regulated exchange or
yeah,
in
yeah,
a
yeah,
regulated broker.
yeah.
But like, I think the world has been very slow to get here. I think, like as you mentioned, the most important thing is the nation state, and the
Yeah.
nation state setting up the framework to do this. And the biggest conflict, I think, is in the end, there's no problem with, I think, the nation state. The problem is the nation states just hesitate to accept something that goes on a neutral blockchain. So they don't want to give. They resist giving the
Whoa.
same
Yeah.
rights, the same ownership rights for securities that live on neutral blockchains, like
Yeah, that's
Ethereum.
great point.
Um,
So, and it is Ethereum, right? That you guys are doing?
we're on Ethereum layer twos right now, and Plume.
Okay.
Plume is a layer
Yeah.
one, but EVM chains, yeah.
You
Uh,
said Clume?
Plume, the
How do you spell that?
Plume, Plume.
Okay.
It's an RWA focused layer one, EVM layer one.
Cool.
Um, I think in the end, definitely the most important, the best case is just having the on-chain security should be the same as holding it in interactive brokers or Robinhood, etc. And just very recently, like in the last couple of months, the US has been taking steps with
Oh, interesting.
DTCC, with Nasdaq, New York Stock Exchange now working on to issue issue the assets directly on chain. So the on chain assets won't be wrappers; they will be the same thing
Whoa.
basically.
And they're
So
making steps to it, just small steps, basically, right?
yeah,
They're not going. They haven't made the choices that you, as somebody who's in this, would have made. It's only hints, right?
yeah, exactly. Because there are a lot of
Yeah.
stakeholders and there are a lot of conflicts of interest. Like the
Yeah.
New York Stock Exchange wants to do it in such a way that once it goes in the market, it wants to sweep all of their
Oh,
wrappers of stocks that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
yeah. They want full.
Yeah,
They want full mirror
yeah,
of whatever's on the stock exchange to
exactly.
be done in that way, and that must be that gets every single company would need to. Well, no, every single company would need to say okay to that,
Yeah.
or somehow legally do it. Is that right, or did I get that wrong?
I'm not sure. I don't think they have to get the consent of the
Yeah,
companies being
interesting.
traded on their floor.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's just bureaucracy and a lot of arduous processes and just getting the like even after Trump,
Yeah.
who claimed
Yeah.
that he would be blah blah
Yeah.
positive towards crypto. It took some time for SEC to admit or to recognize tokenize assets as legitimate, like not scams basically, right? Because the
Yeah.
US was applying a self censorship towards its own citizens, subjects, persons, US persons, in terms of tokenized assets. And even with the Genius Act, for example, they separated the yield-bearing stable coins from non-yield-bearing stable coins. Um, and yield-bearing stable coins are much more constrained in what they can do, just because banks pushed for it. Because banks didn't want their customers, their clients, to gravitate towards yield-bearing stable coins because they're not paying any interest basically on their savings accounts. They know it. They don't want to lose it, and they lobbied for the separation basically. So there's no so like what's most important to understand is, of course, like regulations, bureaucracy. It rarely moves towards the most logical, the most reasonable path. It's just a
Because of
set of
Kafka.
compromises.
So yeah, we were talking about tokenization and regulatory frameworks and other things like that. There's so much there, including the Genius Act. Genius Act is so interesting for me to study because we finally got it right. Whole crypto industry, which was going through crazy transformation from
Mhm.
2017 into 2021, 2022. I almost lost my shirt in 2022. Not as bad as a lot of other people, but really intense time. And then all of a sudden, we get a new president who's pro crypto, and then he does Genius Act, and Genius Act basically makes all stable coins permissioned. So
Yeah.
all because of the banks, and so like the banks want because of the banks and their relationship to the government, want to make everything permissioned and in the same way that they do the U.S. treasuries. Brilliant move, right? Because like I was watching it from 2017 the whole time and seeing China like do these things. They try to stop it, they can't stop it.
Mhm.
Russia tries to stop it, they can't stop it. U.S. is like, oh, we're maybe stop it, but our bureaucracy is too slow and everything like that. And then a brilliant move to plug it into the U.S. Treasury system and therefore make it permissioned and everything like that. And then now we're talking about tokenization. Tokenization seems really important. Maybe we'll go. I want to hear more about the regulatory stuff, so we'll come back to it. But it's actually related to what just happened with the Claude secondary markets, the secondary markets for Anthropic, where people
Mhm.
were people like trading the secondaries, some of which were doing fraud, some of which aren't, and then Anthropic like lays down the hammer and like loses like $300 billion or some large amount of money. What's your take there? Were you following that?
Yeah, I was. I think it's just so. I think it's again like just the markets working and just letting
Yeah,
you know what they want.
yeah,
I I, I, I always get fascinated by it in any case. Um, I mean, so like they were pretty explicit. I think the funny thing is, even though, but because as far as I know, the Anthropic was very explicit in their documents that their shares cannot be traded you know,
yeah,
in secondary markets. But still, the markets wrapped them in SPVs, did this and that, and traded them. I think I think the elephant in the room is America's biggest companies not being traded publicly.
yeah. Interesting.
It's a contemporary issue, right? Stripe isn't traded publicly.
Oh,
Anduril isn't traded publicly.
interesting.
Anthropic, OpenAI, SpaceX is just doing it, right? I think private capital or venture capital took over these growth industries, and I think what made the American financial system great, which was great companies with a lot of growth being publicly traded. I think
Interesting.
there's just a systemic problem with these companies not being IPO'd.
Man, that's a great point. And why do you think that was? And I have a lot of thoughts there because I grew up in my dad is a VC. So my dad has taught me all about this stuff. And we talk about it on our show, Stewart Squared, which is a different show. Uh, Such an interesting point because the VCs, basically Andreessen and the other big winners, they're doing a sort of regulatory arbitrage, right?
Mhm.
They've got their private market. And but like, why is SpaceX going public now? Why did they wait so long? Why? And I know that Anthropic and OpenAI, they're both planning to
Yeah.
IPO basically, right? So what's going on there? Why did they do that?
I think to give the companies credit, so there's the other side of the coin.
Mm,
My view is, especially in the US, it's not universal. Once a company IPOs, that company's main purpose is shareholder value. You
yeah,
know, there's a
yeah,
precedent with
yeah,
Dodge and some brothers.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I forgot the name of the president. So I think for the company, so I do think IPOing enshittifies companies a lot, especially in the US.
Yeah.
MBAs took over instead of they replaced the engineers.
Yeah.
The dividends become more important than
Yeah.
R&D. You know, so there are two sides again. Like there's a compromise. So I just think being private until they reach a certain traction and certain product market fit just allows the companies to have more independence and the founders to be more independent in what they're trying to do. So it's just more advantageous. And the venture capital in the last 20 years proliferated to such a good level, especially in the US. It allows these companies to just live off of venture capital instead of having to
Yeah.
IPO to
Interesting.
raise the capital they need.
Man, okay. And there's a lot of questions I have about because you're from Turkey, you're in Argentina, you're an outsider to this whole organization who's doing some really interesting insider stuff to the actual markets involved.
Yeah.
So I'd love to understand your perspective on China
Hmm.
because China represents such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
They in 1997 they invited my dad to a conference in Beijing. Right after, and my dad was like writing newsletters about the browser in '94, 95, 96, 97, China invites all of Silicon Valley to Beijing,
Hmm.
gets them really drunk, and gets all of their secrets about the internet. And then 3 years later, 6 years later, they actually partner with Cisco in order to build the Great Firewall. Cisco and Oracle and all these guys. And so, like, and then that's not where they stopped because then they started doing open source stuff. So they took this idea of open source and combined it with the national interest to in this sort of like what a lot of the leftists would say is a sort of like fascist sort of combination between the state and the markets.
Yeah.
And then they created open source and they used it to their national advantage, exactly in the way that you said that my understanding of what you said in the United States with the Ford versus the Dodge brothers. That was the moment where the United States shareholders stopped paying attention to the national interest and only paid attention to the shareholder interest.
Yeah.
And now you've got China just like open sourcing everything. They just open sourced RISC-V, which is a really important open source instruction set standard that will make all of robotics really open source. They got it out of the United States. They moved it to Switzerland along with the leftists in Berkeley who helped them do that. And so they're just going to like run everything open source. What's your take? Where did I get wrong? What's your understanding of the role China plays in that context of what we're talking about VC money and stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I was just watching, I just saw a video about it yesterday, actually, about this exact topic. So there are these companies in China, high growth companies, publicly traded, but their stock has been standing still for years, maybe a decade or two. The stock price isn't following the growth of the company because the investors, the market knows that the purpose of the company is not maximizing shareholder value. It is to apply government directives.
Oh man,
whatever those directives may be, good or bad. It's bad for the shareholder, but look at what it brought, where it brought China to. I think the whole ordeal with China, with China's rises, it proved to the world the mainstream orthodox Western ideas about economics, about policies, about growth. So, because before China, there was this mentality of what West says is the truth. It is the truth.
Yeah.
And you should be striving to get there. But China was like, no, we do things differently, and
Yeah,
we get
interesting.
where it got us. So, but of course, ideologically, that's just me. Philosophically, I would hate to live in China. Freedom,
Yeah.
long live freedom.
Yeah. But yeah, go for it.
Um, again, so there's also freedom for me, not for thee, right? Like I believe, I guess, in the sense, I'm also a politically a third worlder.
Yeah.
I do believe for Americans to live in such amount of wealth and prosperity, someone in Africa has to suffer. They do suffer.
So it's a zero sum. There's a zero sum nature to the
Yes.
economic world.
Yeah. Even so, the whole system, of course, like I'm not denying any gains of capitalism and our system, and in reducing poverty. I do think the whole system as a whole is positive sum,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
within the status
Yeah.
quo, there's a zero sum.
Oh, interesting.
The system going on. So the system is positive sum, but within the system, it is kind of zero sum.
Philosophically, what does that mean for you? Like where I went with that is basically it ends in feudalism, right?
Kinda.
Like feudalism is where we're headed.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because now Peter Thiel has joined both you and me in Buenos Aires and went to a chess thing. And my friend, I stole it from a friend, but he called it, the videos of him were very wholesome. He goes to the chess club and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it's wholesome techno feudalism.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like feudalism just seems like that's where we're headed based on what you said. And then I've been reading a lot of European history from the period of 1000 to 1500, which is really interesting given what you just said, because that's the period, like my understanding of what you said about the Western thing is this sort of like Protestantism turned into an economic theory.
I agree.
Secularized as an economic theory, got the religion out of there. But didn't get the religion out of there because the religion's still there.
Stuck. The religion,
the morality stuff, Yeah. Interesting. That's from the Enlightenment, and you got the 1500s, the Protestant Revolution that leads to this sort of like breaking with the Catholic Church. But if you study the period from 1000 to 1500, that's when the cathedrals were made, and that's where and they don't like looking at that because they're like, oh, that's all superstition, that's all this religion stuff with the morality and the spiritual truth and all this different stuff. And so it kind of like but it's a really interesting period of history. And that was where the Industrial Revolution required that in order to do it. But the West went away with it, and sort of like probably through a pride thing, I think we just kind of lost access to a lot of the interesting creativity that happened there. But that's where we're headed back, right? We're going back to feudalism.
Yeah.
We're going back to that sort of like a hierarchy, basically, where there is this zero sum nature to wealth. And it just feels like a structural thing that you can't, like, it just is what it is, right?
I think, like, yeah, feudalism. Maybe I'm just
Yeah.
thinking out loud. But this whole Silicon Valley techno feudalist structure, instead of feudalism, it may resemble clergy more to me, because
Ooh.
they hold the key, the Western Catholic clergy actually.
Yeah.
So they hold the keys to what's inaccessible to the general public,
Yeah.
and
So like the
because
Knights Templar.
yeah, exactly. And so they gatekeep, right? They gatekeep the knowledge, which
Yeah.
earns them a huge amount of capital. And we are living in a capitalist society, capitalist world. So the knowledge they possess hands them the capital, and with that capital, they become the lords of everyone. And they sell you with tokens. They sell you parcels of heaven.
But they get it first in the private markets where and then they're closing off the access points to the private
Well,
markets, right?
to their credit, I think they invented, you know, just like the clergy. The clergy invented the church,
Yeah.
like their
Oh,
doctrine.
interesting. Yeah.
And these people, to their credit, they invent the AI, they invent the blockchain, they invent
Yeah.
technological breakthroughs, they invent the iPhone. So, and capitalism is inherently meritocratic. So there's a meritocratic feudalism going on. Because yeah,
Yeah.
these guys invented these things. So, and they accumulate a lot of capital because of it. But this capital and power, because of the knowledge they possess, gives them great power. So there's a great divergence. Techno feudalism. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like the clerical point. I'm going to steal it and I'll attribute it. So I'll share that I got it from you, but it's the clerics. So they're priests in a class
Yeah.
who have access to secret knowledge, gnosis, Gnosticism stuff.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is that the AI, the LLMs, they distribute that.
Yeah.
As the Chinese figured out, they distill that. They do distillation attacks. I'm currently getting Claude to reverse engineer the Claude chatbot for me so that I can have my own chatbot based on Chinese open source models after their crazy thing they did in the last 2 months. And so it's like you can't gatekeep the knowledge, right? Is that
It's
true? What do you think?
it's I think it brings it brings a fun dialectic
Yeah.
to the whole context. No, I do agree. So, for example, I don't think these people, like these people who invent the AI, Anthropic, OpenAI,
Yep.
they aren't inherently evil.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what I believe.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I agree.
they
Yep.
so AI definitely brings so much positivity to our life, so much knowledge,
Yeah.
and that knowledge trickles down to the average Joe,
Yeah.
and not the average Joe, and a research lab in China, and the research lab in China gets it, reverse engineers it, makes a better copy of it,
It spreads it
it spreads it.
for cheap.
Until now, so far, still American labs are still always one step ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the Chinese it's just the Americans take one step, and DeepSeek is just one step behind. They're the shadow. So it creates a great democratization effect as well.
Yeah. But I've been thinking, like, where does this end? And it's not only for LLMs, but also robots, given the
Yeah.
RISC-V thing that I was just mentioning. The RISC-V thing is really important because it means that all the robots that are going to be built so that China can get around regulations will be open source. And that's going to be really interesting because the LLMs plug into robots in this very interesting way. And so I had a question about, it's like, oh yeah, so do you think that China's never done it? Like, what they do is they go through every critical manufacturing thing, they bring scale to that,
Yeah.
they bring the knowledge and the institutional knowledge, and they basically just own that.
Yeah.
And make it they make it so cheap that no American, no European, no other company can compete at that level, as long as there's some sort of mass participation in the manufacturing. If it requires a lot of people and it can be manufactured, China owns that.
Yeah.
And like it's just like across the board in almost everything outside of like oil refinery and kerosene and other things like that. They just do that now, but they always keep it cheap. But I worry that what happens if they apply this pressure to the foundational labs, they catch up. The foundational labs raise their prices, only become inside of corporations, gatekeep mythos, that type of stuff, so that it's like behind this gate wall that can't be distilled easily. I'm sure the Chinese can figure out how to do it behind the gatekeeps as well. But, and then what if it happens if they do the same thing they did to Arduino? The Chinese do the same thing they did to Arduino, but to these foundational labs. Then China has a monopoly. Then China like raises the prices and we all lose AI. It's a weird kind of like a thing. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's definitely a doomy scenario. Like
Yeah.
it's like I think there's a lot of mishappenings that have to happen to
Yes.
get to that
Interesting.
point.
Yeah.
I think like I agree with what you said with China's model is they're not usually in the cutting edge of stuff. They're,
Yeah. Interesting.
as I said, like they're just one step behind. They're in the shadows, but they perfect all other things,
Yeah.
and their edge is making things at incredible scale compared to incredible technology. And I think, for example, modern warfare proved us that this may be the right approach, right? Cheap but effective drones, still, not completely, not completely. Forgot. Whatever. I forgot the word in English. Excuse me. Primitive, not completely primitive. They're still technologically advanced, but they're not in the cutting edge. They're optimized for mass production,
Hmm.
and they're winning wars right now. And wars are interesting. Like they're ugly, but they have this way of exposing the truth in a very aggressive way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think the problem is with these American labs. So the Chinese just proved that they're just much more nimble. They'll copy everything they can get their hands on. As long as the American labs release anything to the public, the Chinese will find a way to copy it to an extraordinary degree. Um, and now there are I think that the legal protectionism of the U.S., legal
Hmm.
gatekeeping culture, eh, is the only thing, or the most major thing that may bring the demise of
Hmm.
American leadership in
Yeah.
in this industry, because Elon will sue OpenAI, and like OpenAI will get in a legal entanglement with Anthropic, this that, because America is such a, what do you call it, like a legalist culture. Everything revolves around the legality and indictments, and trials.
Yeah.
And while Americans are getting entangled up in all this, like all these ordeals, the Chinese, because they don't care about the legality that much, right? They can much more nimbly,
Yeah.
catch up. But I think then, like them catching up, then them making it closed source, then them gatekeeping it, making it very expensive. I think that's far fetched, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I'm sure that if that happens, then the Americans will find a way to catch up in another way. So there's the great nature of
Yeah.
competition.
Interesting.
I don't think will allow AI to be monopolized by any single entity, or
Yeah, I like that.
yeah.
And that will lead into the robotics and everything else, because I think what you just said will also, if my theory is wrong, and I don't think it's going to be right. I think it's a neurotic thing of like, oh man, this thing is really cool. I don't want to lose access to this thing. I want to keep on building. And so, but that like it's if it is sort of spread very evenly around the population, and some kid in Africa with access to an ESP32, a camera, and a
Mhm.
LLM can build this giant robot for himself and start building other robots with those robots, then like we have a very different world. And this goes back to the crypto thing as well, because it's I think it's probably a good thing, even though it does not feel good to me as an American patriot who loves my country and doesn't want to see American power descend
Mhm.
because of what American power used to represent. I don't think it really represents what it used to represent anymore, both foreign policy and domestically. I don't think we're paying attention to the spirit of our Constitution. I don't think we're holding that value, and it might have been quite some times, at least since 1962 or around that period, have we been sort of paying attention to the Constitution. And so, and not just the legal Constitution, as you mentioned, like the legal aspects of it, but like the spirit of it. And I don't think those things are happening anymore. And so it's like with a sort of like a anxiety that I feel like it might actually be a good thing that the U.S. federal system is entering gridlock, political gridlock, because it just means that all those guys who are doing, in my opinion, a bunch of crimes and stuff like that at that highest level, like they just won't have the power to do their crimes at the level they would if it was fully captured, or no, sorry, fully unionized, like unioned, because there is inter-elite conflict going on in the U.S. basically at the federal level with a bunch of what I see are criminals, and so that is going to be really interesting. But I think it actually is a good thing for the spirit of the United States and the spirit of our Constitution, because it's freedom, right? The lack of state allows for freedom in crypto, in this weird melding between cryptocurrency, robots, and LLMs. What do you think there?
I think so. I think that's what makes American system great. For example, because you're saying the federal, as the federal system is getting gridlocked, it kind of gets too focused on its own internal conflicts, and it basically can't pay attention to compete with what's going on in Silicon Valley and the elite there. And there's, of course, I think the physical distance is like maybe not so much in today's world, but still it plays a part. Like there's a lot of physical distance, but also like there's just something and it's a federal system, so there's just something going on in Silicon Valley and in other places. If the federal government gets too much entanglements within its own system, it simply can't pay attention to. For example, this is absolutely not how it works in Turkey. Like from my own experience, right? Like there's no. This is just an incomprehensible concept.
Because it's centralized.
Extremely centralized. French type, modeled after the French Republic. So very unionized. Like not very unionized in the labor sense. It's not unionized enough, I think, in the labor sense, but it's very centralized. The central government basically operates everything. Provinces are just municipalities; they just have municipal duties. And it's getting even more centralized, because in 2018 the constitution was changed through a referendum, and the presidential system was introduced, and now it's basically a sultanate almost. Which is ironic, because the Ottoman Empire itself was actually pretty decentralized.
Interesting.
What happened is the central authority of the Sultan was combined with the centralized republican concept of France, which is like
which is centralized, which is Napoleon.
It's very intense. So I think, like, look, I agree with what you say. Like, it's just the federal system getting caught up in its own BS. Just lets the progressives in the technical sense, the meritocratic people, to do their own thing and progress in their own lane. And but still, because the federal government, like the American federal government, it doesn't only correspond to its own country. It's a global entity, and the problems that go inside the American federal government affect all of us. You can't escape it.
Interesting. What is the country that is least affected by that? It's probably Russia, right? No, maybe China. China is the.
I'd guess China. I'd say China, because, for example, I think the interest rates, like the global economy, is based on U.S. Treasury rates. As the American federal government gets in all these entanglements, increases deficit spending, the interest rates of U.S. Treasuries go up. When that happens, The carry traders in Turkey and Argentina start unwinding their positions to buy U.S. treasuries. So an American federal government crisis affects the exchange rate in Turkey, which affects inflation in Turkey, which makes the life of the average Turk worse. So, like, it's a very globalized world, and I think maybe ironically, I'm not saying this for certain, but maybe the entrepreneur in Silicon Valley is less affected by the scan by something that causes the American U.S. Treasury rates to go up than an average Joe in the countryside of Turkey, because they get affected by inflation more.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah,
And Argentina is a perfect example of
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right?
Argentina is it's crazy. Yeah,
Because they in 2001, like it's so interesting because the U.S. boomers, the boomer population in my country are like the most entitled generation in
yeah,
the world, and we millennials like would definitely have it better than a lot of the rest of the world, but also relatively are both us and the Gen Z, and the Gen Z is aware of it much more than the millennials, and
yeah.
the millennials are like voting in communists to somehow give the boomer money to foreigner whatever. So basically, but like boomers are really entitled in the United States. They all vote for their own interest,
Yeah.
and like they'll just squeeze out a couple another years. It doesn't care if the whole medical system collapses after they're gone, as long as they have a few more, and they just don't seem to care. It's uh, uh, the Argentine boomers are like the most resilient,
Yeah.
non-entitled, just like people who have gotten fucked over and
Getting
then are now
humbled a
getting
lot.
yeah, getting humbled. Yeah, ever since 2001, and it's exactly to your point. It's just like the Argentine government couldn't print its way out of this situation in
Tried.
2001,
It
and so they
tried.
had to devalue. They tried, yeah, but they just couldn't do it because of what you're talking about, right? Because
Uh,
the U.S. Yeah,
I'm sorry. You mentioned you're talking about the pegging of the peso of to the US dollar before Corralito.
uh, no, well, no, I was talking about Corralito. I'm not sure on the microeconomic influences that led to the Corralito,
Okay.
but the basically just like that was maybe like what is that because they were trying to print money, but at some point I think there was actually something the Argentine government literally ran out of paper. That was the moment that they literally couldn't print more money
Uh,
um, in 2001. But what do you know?
mm, Actually, no. So I'm not. I don't know the story about the paper. That may be
Yeah.
a true story, but I don't think that's the exact moment. So what led to that moment, to my knowledge, is they pegged the peso. They pegged the Menam's famous
Uh-huh.
economy minister. I forget his name.
Interesting.
They pegged the peso to the US dollar. Okay, they didn't directly change to the US dollar. They didn't directly introduce US dollar.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
one peso was pegged to one US dollar, and they were able to do it with a lot of external support, like in early 90s, because they basically had the reserves to in the central bank to peg the peso to the US dollar. But the problem with that is they kept deficit spending. So
Hmm.
they can't print their money, print their own money, the uh, because they're using the US dollar,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
but they kept deficit spending, so they kept borrowing from external markets denominated in US dollars. So that introduces something that you cannot print your way out of, because you can't print US dollars as Argentina.
Interesting. Interesting.
And in the late 90s, there were a lot of, so that this is also interesting. There were a lot of emerging market crises in
Yeah.
Mexico,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Brazil, in
Yeah.
Southeast Asia. And these always, and in 2001, there was a big crisis, financial crisis in Turkey as well. Because the EM markets, like once an EM market starts to get shaky, because EM markets, they're even indexed, right? They're put in a basket.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the analyst in Wall Street starts saying, okay, we're unwinding our EM positions. It can be Malaysia and Argentina at the same time. So because of the Mexican crisis, because of the Brazilian crisis, because of the Southeast Asian crisis, it got harder and harder for Argentina to finance its deficit with external borrowing
Yeah. Interesting.
as an emerging market. In 2001, basically, like the crisis started before 2001. It wasn't immediate.
Yeah, interesting.
A recession happened. They were in recession for, I think, 2 or 3 years before 2001. Then in 2001, they basically couldn't keep the system going anymore, and they defaulted, and they basically confiscated the dollar savings. Like they devalued the currency by 3 times, and they
Against the dollar. So they
yeah,
so the oh interesting.
yeah.
Because that yeah.
There was a forced exchange. So there was a confiscation of dollars at a diminished exchange rate, 3 to 1.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Or
So,
that the government could pay its liabilities, and it still couldn't pay its liabilities, but it helped a bit, I guess. So the issue is, so oh, let's abolish the central bank. Oh, it's great. Let's
yeah.
No, you also need to abolish deficit spending if you want to do that.
Which
Which is
Milei has done that, right? He's stopped deficit spending, or there's like a there's a
primary deficit. So yeah, he did. I think what accomplished is extraordinary. It's amazing in just the economic sense,
yeah.
in the macroeconomic sense. He did stop deficit spending, but for example, they don't count interest payments
Oh,
in that
and they've
deficit
got giant
spending.
IMF interest payments, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so there's a bit of financial engineering, accounting going on
Okay.
reporting the
Okay.
surplus.
Interesting. Yep.
And the problem is they did achieve a surplus, again, to their credit, but the surplus they achieve is so little. Like,
Compared to the interest payments and everything,
yes,
and
the
so
country cannot, like they structurally can't achieve a surplus
wow.
that's enough for them to pay their obligations without borrowing more. But still, that surplus it's still positive because it allows them to refinance their payments at lower interest rates.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Man, the finance stuff is just so crazy because
yeah,
it just runs everything, but it's also really difficult because it's such a connected. This
yeah,
is why I like talking to finance people because finance people understand the difference between truth and falsehood in the limited financial sense because you make money or you lose money, and there's all these tricks that you can do to hide that whether you lose or win money. Let's talk about emerging markets. At what point well, and there's the technical stuff of what you guys are doing as well, which is really interesting. But at some point, the world economy is going to shift to a cryptocurrency mediated tokenized thing, right? And we're at the very beginning of this tokenizing thing, right?
I I agree. I do think we're shifting to a more tokenized. I don't agree that it's gonna be the end game and the monolith that's running the whole world. Like, I think it's gonna be a major system, but it's. I don't think it's still certain that we're gonna be living in a blockchain dominated, crypto dominated financial system. I think there's a lot of existing interests, a lot of existing
Yeah.
stakeholders, systems in place. For example, just the other day, the president of the European Central Bank, Lagarde, she said, "Oh, stablecoins aren't. We don't believe that stablecoins are the best way to push, European or the euro currency interests
Yeah.
around the world and increase euro
Yeah.
adoption.
Yeah.
Instead, we'll focus more on boomer institutions to increase the adoption of the euro." I'm not saying it's right, but
Yeah.
it is the case. Like, so I don't think this whole tokenization or private money, you know, competition of financial systems within like with blockchain and TradFi. I still think we're early to say that for certain, and also I think people in our industry we just overstate the importance of neutrality in financial systems. It's important for some cases, but for example, like China and Russia, right? Like I think they started working on a blockchain based settlement system. Like the countries are really, like, just by their nature, they're very hesitant to hand power into a neutral system.
Yep. Yep.
They just like
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
the the corporate bond, like the that it makes a lot of sense why the corporate bond, right? Because the corporate bond is a corporation, it's
Yeah.
outside of the government.
Yeah.
Why did you guys like? Is it are you focused on specific corporate bonds, or are you focused on a basket of corporate bonds?
Just any US dollar denominated publicly traded corporate bond, which is like a $38 trillion market. The reason, yeah, we chose to focus on corporate bonds, not sovereign bonds.
Hmm.
So there are actually dollar denominated government bonds outside of the US are in the same basket as well. So we have to separate bonds into local currency and
Whoa.
foreign currency. Even though they're both bonds, they're actually very structurally different things.
Whoa.
So a corporate, so we can say a corporate that's borrowing in local currency or foreign currency, including the US dollars, and a government borrowing in a foreign currency that is not
Oh.
its own currency. This is one basket, this is one side,
Whoa.
because there is default risk. Then there is the local currency bonds of governments, US dollar bonds of the US government,
Yeah, which are huge, right?
bonds. What?
Which are huge. Like local government bonds are.
They're the setting stone of the whole global financial system. So what can happen with the US Treasury is the US government literally cannot run out of its own currency.
Yeah,
It's impossible.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What can happen is they can print, and it's not like the central bank directly
Yeah,
finances the
yeah,
treasury. That's illegal.
yeah.
But what they do is like they do quantitative easing, right? They just buy it from the banks.
Yeah.
So um, so these do not carry default risk, and these are great assets to create stable coins out of, because if I have a Mexican government bond denominated in Mexican pesos, I can use that to create a Mexican stable coin or a Mexican peso savings product out of. Because a stable coin's most important thing is it has to be pegged to the currency,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So if I'm using that local currency of that government, yes, then I'm good. So if you try to create a stable coin, yes, let's say a US dollar stable coin backed by US dollar denominated corporate bonds. I mean, this is done actually with private credit, with all this in crypto. So there's a default risk, there's a depegging risk structurally. So what you do is you claim to do great risk management, or it's doing investment grade, yeah, but in the tail end, the risk is never zero. In the end of local currency government bonds, yes, the risk of just default is zero.
Hmm.
There can be other things,
Yeah.
regulatory stuff, the
Interesting.
company may go bankrupt, etc. But putting those things aside, the underlying risk, the risk of the underlying asset is zero at the tail end. But with any other bond, a corporate bond, for example, any corporate bond, because no corporation can print its own money,
Yeah.
or any government bond that is not the local currency, the tail risk is never zero.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's the main. So bonds are separated into two. We focus on the bonds that don't have a zero tail risk of defaulting, because a
Yeah.
bond, yeah, our
Yeah.
niche,
Yeah.
our niche is being an investment product with bonds instead of a savings product with bonds.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
and,
interesting.
and to be an investment product with bonds, you have to bring returns above the benchmark rate, which is the US Treasuries.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And do you have to go at the hour, or can you go a
No,
few
I'm
minutes over?
I'm
Okay.
good. I'm
Okay,
good.
so that's a really interesting point. I have to go. I have to go study what you said in order to get it at a deeper level.
Mhm.
I love this investment versus savings, and then there's like a local The local bonds. Why are the local U.S. municipal bonds? Those are the ones that have zero risk. Are you saying
No, the federal. The municipal bonds are included in our side
all the other ones
because a municipality, a state can't technically
can go
go bankrupt.
bankrupt?
They
They
because
can't
they
go
can't print
bankrupt.
the US dollar.
Yeah. So the federal are the 0% risk, and this is like 0% risk. Is it? It's not 0 point or 0.0001. It's zero because of math, or is it because of the power of the U.S. government? Why is that zero?
Because of the power of because of the
Yeah. Okay.
system, because of the
Yeah.
power of the US government. Look, the value of that bond may devalue a lot, like because of inflation,
Yeah. Okay.
because US dollar may go down in value compared to euros against the euro or the pound or the yen.
Yeah.
Yes, you do take FX risk, but there's zero possibility of not getting your money back in that currency. You will always get your $100 back. Your $100 may be worth nothing when you get it back. That's a different issue, but you will always get your $100 back. In our world of the bonds, in our side of the bonds, you may not always get
Yeah, yeah,
the.
and that makes sense. That makes it more truthful, basically, right? It makes it more falsifiable. Like, and that comes from Popper and the scientific method. That
Mhm.
basically you're entering this world which has competition.
Yeah.
The U.S. that U.S. system, which is so interesting because it does feel like a sort of communist type situation that doesn't that means we're maybe not in a capitalist system because the quantitative easing thing you mentioned,
Yeah.
but we'll set that aside. So there's competition there, and because of the competition, it makes it investable because one bond beats another bond. Going back to that sort of zero sum thing.
It's just so it depends on what risk you want to get for what return
Yeah,
you want to
interesting.
earn. So these our side of the bonds get um, they get rated. I mean, local currency bonds get rated as well, but that's
Hmm.
different. That's the rating there pertains more to the devaluation risk, the inflation risk that I mentioned. But on our side, the rating corresponds more to the actual capability of paying it back. Is this entity that borrowed a currency that it cannot create out of thin air, is this entity going to be able to pay this money back? The other side is this entity will always pay it back, but let's see when they pay it back,
Oh,
how much
interesting.
value that payment will still hold. Um, so in our side, yeah, so there are high yield bonds and there are investment grade bonds, and there's a structural difference. Like high yield bonds are also called junk bonds.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think it's so like we actually focus more on high yield bonds, but like not only high yield bonds.
Yeah.
I think junk bonds, the junk bond nomenclature. I think it does.
It's like junk DNA.
Yeah.
The junk DNA or fascia. The really interesting points here of basically very interdisciplinary. Um, the fascia, the connective tissue in our
Mhm.
skin and our muscles and our bones. When the doctors in scientism at Johns Hopkins University, when they were doing a bunch of cocaine, they were like, when they're doing dissections, they were just throw that in the trash, just throw that in the trash. It doesn't matter. It's not the bone, it's not the muscle, it's not the brain, not the nervous system.
Mhm.
And so they called it junk. Same thing happened in junk DNA. They found
Mm.
parts of DNA called junk. And so what I think you're saying is that junk bonds, yes, while there is part of it that is like this 2008 type situation, like
Yeah.
structured credit type of thing that can go like that, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean the whole thing is not investable at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the categorization is not granular enough.
Yeah,
Basically,
interesting.
I mean, it's granular enough at the letter level. There's it starts from D default, triple C, sorry, C, double C, triple C, triple B, sorry, B, double B, triple B, etc. So it is granular on that level,
Yeah.
but anything that's not a triple B is considered junk rate, junk bond, junk bond.
So triple B is the highest grade.
No, a triple A
Oh, okay.
is
But
the
triple A,
highest grade.
yeah.
This is Fitch and S&P. Moody's is a bit different. Like they do like two letters, etc. But so the top is AAA. Triple
Got it.
B,
Yeah.
triple B is the minimum investable level,
Got it.
in this
Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it.
categorization.
Got it. Interesting.
But for example, what's funny is um, an emerging market bond, an emerging market with corporations that are on the that are double B on average, let's say, can have a lower default rate
Hmm.
than U.S. corporations
Yep.
at the triple B level.
That's crazy because we have this giant private credit system, right? Is private credit involved with that? Is there a linkage between what you just said? Because you're just like the 2008, all those Moody's things, that was all within the public sector, but all
Yeah.
that high risk money now has moved into private credit, and so they're separate. Are those things separate?
Yeah, they're separate. What I was saying is
Yeah,
the reason is because the financial system in the US is much more developed,
yeah,
so the amount of companies that can issue public bonds is much higher. But in
got it.
an emerging market, for an emerging market company, corporation, to be able to issue a bond, they have to be much more established than their American counterparty.
Oh, got it.
counterpart.
Interesting. Do they have to do that in the United States?
No, not at all. Yeah, they can do it anywhere, and it's actually funny. So a bond is named after where it was issued. So a bond that was issued in the U.S. is called a Yankee bond. A bond that's issued in Europe is called a Euro bond.
Yeah.
One that's issued in Japan is called a Samurai bond. So if a foreign entity issues a bond outside of its jurisdiction, depending on where it issues the bond gets named after Euro bond, Samurai bond, Yankee bond, etc.
So last 5 minutes, what is the emerging market that has the best bonds that you're thinking of, not as investment advice, but just like
Oh,
at the sovereignty level of like which because it's so interesting. Like I have a hint or an intuition that yes, the US is probably going to continue to be the best place to build a company,
hmm
to have a stable company sort of lifespan. There might be some changes though in the regulation, talking about what we were talking about with the gridlock and stuff like that might change that, but it's probably far off because no matter what, like whatever political group gets power in the United States,
yeah,
business normally wins
yeah,
unless the communists really do take over, um, which might be happen. But where like I'll give an example to Kyrgyzstan.
yeah.
Kyrgyzstan recently put out a USD stablecoin, but not backed by the USD. It's backed by gold.
hmm
Is Kyrgyzstan the most sovereign sort of like third world country in that original definition of third world? What's the emerging market that you're most excited about?
That's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer.
Yeah,
But
there's so many of them.
there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it really depends. So on the bond market, the political and safe answer is Korea because it is
Oh,
somehow
whoa.
still classified as an emerging market. Okay,
Whoa.
so that's the political answer. But oh man, I'd say so. Look, with bonds, what there are many. I won't be able to pick one, but of course, like Turkey, Indonesia,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Brazil? No, Brazil's not. No.
Brazil is just too unstable. It's Latin America.
I love that South America is like that. I
Yeah,
love that it's like America, it's like the United States, but
yeah.
it's somehow different and never trustworthy enough to
Yeah,
ever put money into.
Mexico is actually a good one because
Yeah.
Mexico is close enough to the US.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'd say Mexico, Turkey, and Indonesia are the. So what's
Interesting.
important for bond markets is of course who's borrowing the money. If the borrower is 100-year-old company that's embedded in its own system and that's never defaulted, that's a great company. And if that country doesn't have it, that country keeps on growing, you know.
Yeah, interesting. They get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, like Turkey
Yeah.
is a good example because Turkey's share in global economy is slowly increasing. Turkey has
Hmm.
its own problems like inflation, but Turkish inflation is completely different compared to Argentine inflation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Turkish
Interesting.
inflation is more mismanagement, of course, but it's a result of growing pains as well. Not completely. There's great mismanagement, terrible mismanagement, but Argentine inflation is more structural. It's more scary. It's scary. Turkish inflation can be solved if
Yeah, yeah. If
overnight,
the right,
almost
yeah,
overnight,
yeah,
with
yeah.
proper execution.
Whereas Argentina is just this incredibly precarious place that
Incredibly,
somehow is awesome to live in at the same
yeah,
time. Okay, well, we can definitely do another one because there's a lot more that we didn't get to.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Just follow me on Twitter, Kadioglakin, my last name and first name, and check Bondi on if they want to learn more about our work.
What's
That's
the
it.
website? Bondi what?
Bondi Finance. It's bondifinance.io, our website. Like if the listeners want to learn more about our work, just on Twitter they can find us. They can find me. They'll find Bondi on my profile if they find me on Twitter. So yeah, Twitter, I'd say the town
Great.
hall. Find me at the town hall.